When my son, David, and his wife, Emily, told me I would never see my grandchild, my whole world went silent. We were in their living room, the air thick and cold. "She will never know you, Carol," Emily said, her voice like ice. "I will make sure of it." Friend, before I go on, let me ask you, would you do me a kindness? Tap subscribe so you don't miss what comes next, and tell me in the comments where you're listening from. It helps me see just how far my story reaches. It all felt like a terrible dream. Just that morning I was sitting in my own quiet house surrounded by love. Faded pictures lined my mantelpiece. David on his first day of school. David holding his little league trophy. David smiling in his graduation cap. My life had been about raising a good, kind son. I thought I had. His laughter was the song I knew best, his happiness my only goal. My little home was a museum of our shared memories, a place built on love and sacrifice. I never imagined that the boy in those pictures would one day sit silently while his wife erased me from his life. I had to understand why. It all started on a sunny Tuesday, just a few months before everything fell apart. I was in my kitchen, watering my African violets on the windowsill, when the phone rang. It was my son, David. I could hear the smile in his voice before he even said a word. "Mum, are you sitting down?" "I have some news," he said, practically bubbling over with excitement. My heart did a little flutter. "Emily's pregnant. You're going to be a grandma." Oh, the joy that filled me in that moment. It felt like the sun had burst right inside my chest. I sank into a kitchen chair, tears welling up in my eyes. A grandchild, a little piece of my David, a new person to love and cherish. I immediately started picturing it all, knitting tiny blue booties, pushing a stroller through the local park, the sweet smell of baby powder. I was so unbelievably happy for David and his wife Emily. I couldn't wait to shower that baby with all the love in my heart. I thought it was the beginning of everything wonderful. It never occurred to me that my joy was seen as a threat. The very next day I drove into town, my heart set on finding the perfect gift. I wanted something special, something that would last. I passed the pharmacy and the grocery store and went straight to a little bookshop on Main Street. The bell above the door jingled as I walked in, smelling the lovely scent of old paper and new ink. After searching for nearly an hour, I found it, a beautiful, hardbound book of classic bedtime stories with gold lettering on the cover. It was filled with colourful pictures of sleepy bears and smiling moons. "It's for my first grandchild," I told the woman at the counter, my voice filled with pride. I could already imagine it so clearly. Me sitting in a rocking chair, a sweet little baby cuddled on my lap, their tiny fingers pointing at the pages. I pictured reading these stories to them, my voice soft and low until they drifted off to sleep. I paid for the book and carried it out of the store like a treasure. I had no idea that this simple gift, this token of a grandmother's love, would be used as the first weapon against me. I wrapped the storybook in cheerful yellow paper and tied it with a perfect white bow. A few days later, I brought it with me when I visited my son, David, and his wife, Emily. I felt a flutter of excitement as I handed the gift to her in their living room. "I saw this and thought of the baby," I said, my voice warm. Emily smiled, but it was a tight, thin line that didn't reach her eyes. She unwrapped it carefully. "Oh, a book," she said, her voice flat. "Thank you, Carol." She didn't open it. She didn't even glance at the cover. She simply placed it face down on the end table and immediately changed the subject. "Did you see the storm they're forecasting for this weekend?" she asked, looking at David. My son didn't seem to notice a thing. I felt a small, sharp sting in my chest. It felt like she hadn't just set aside the book. She had set me aside too. I quickly told myself I was being silly and oversensitive. But as I sat on their couch, a little seed of doubt was planted in my heart. I had no idea it was about to be watered with cruelty. A week later, I was sitting at their kitchen table sipping a cup of tea. As my daughter-in-law, Emily, talked about all the things she still needed to do before the baby arrived, I saw a chance to be useful, to be a part of it all. "Emily, dear," I began, "I would be so happy to help. I could cook some meals you can freeze or maybe help you paint the nursery." I just wanted to contribute, to feel like a grandmother. She stopped stirring her coffee and gave me that same polite, empty smile. "That's very sweet of you, Carol. But I have everything under control. We have a very specific plan." My son, David, just nodded from across the table. "Yeah, Mum, Emily's got it all figured out," he said, as if he were her spokesman. It was a polite no, but it felt like a door slamming shut in my face. I drove home feeling foolish, like a stranger who had offered help where it wasn't wanted. They were building a new life, and it was becoming clear there was no space for me in their plans. On my next visit, Emily finally offered to show me the baby's nursery. "It's finished," she announced. I followed her down the hall, my heart full of hope. But when she opened the door, I was taken aback. The room was cold and stark, painted in shades of grey and white. There were no soft colours, no cheerful animals. I looked around the modern shelves for the storybook I'd given them, the one I dreamed of reading to my grandchild. It was nowhere to be seen. "It's very clean," I said, trying to find the right word. "Where did you put the little book of stories I gave you?" Emily didn't miss a beat. "Oh, that," she said, waving a dismissive hand. "The colours were all wrong, so it didn't match the room's style. It's in a box in the closet." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. My gift, my dream, was in a dark closet because its colours were wrong. My son David stood silently in the doorway, and in that moment I knew. This wasn't about style. Then she said the 6 words I'll never forget. A few days later, while cleaning out a hope chest, my fingers brushed against something cool and familiar. It was my son David's silver baby rattle. I spent the afternoon polishing it until it gleamed, memories of his tiny hand wrapped around it flooding my heart. This wasn't just a toy. It was a connection, a piece of our family's history to pass down. With a renewed sense of purpose, I took it over to their house. I found my daughter-in-law, Emily, in the living room. "I found this," I said, holding out the shining heirloom. "It was David's. I thought the baby should have it." Emily recoiled as if I'd offered her a spider. She wouldn't even touch it. "Absolutely not," she said, her voice sharp and cold. "I can't possibly give that to my child. Think of the germs. It's old and unhygienic." The word unhygienic echoed in the quiet room. She had looked at a piece of my son's past, a symbol of my love, and called it filth. I stood there, stunned into silence, the beautiful rattle suddenly feeling heavy and worthless in my hand. That's when I realised she wasn't just building a future, she was destroying my past. My hands were shaking as I drove home from David and Emily's house. That night I couldn't sleep. The cruelty of it all churned in my stomach. I finally gathered the courage to call my son, David, needing to hear him say that his wife had been out of line. "David," I started, my voice trembling slightly. "What Emily said about your rattle, it was deeply unkind. It hurt me." The silence on the other end of the line was long and heavy. When he finally spoke, his voice was tired. "Mum, come on. You know how she is. She's pregnant and stressed about everything being perfect." I tried again. "But David, it was a family piece. It felt like she was rejecting." He cut me off, his tone becoming sharp. "She didn't mean it like that. You're taking it the wrong way. Can you please just not cause problems?" Don't cause problems. The word struck me like a physical blow. My pain was a problem to be managed. He had made his choice. I had to choose between fighting for my son and saving myself. Against my better judgment, I went to the baby shower. It was held in a bright room filled with my daughter-in-law Emily's young, laughing friends. I felt like a ghost from the moment I walked in. I brought a handmade blanket, but it looked plain next to the mountain of expensive gifts from the registry I was never told about. I tried to join a conversation, offering a gentle piece of advice. When my David was a baby, I found that warming his blanket helped him sleep. One of the girls just smiled politely and said, "Oh, we have machines for that now." They didn't mean to be cruel, but the message was clear. I was outdated. My experience meant nothing. My son David brought me a small plate of cake, but was quickly pulled away by Emily, who never once made eye contact with me. I sat alone, watching the woman who hated me be celebrated as a mother. I was an outsider at the party for my own grandchild. Then, across the room, I saw Emily open her laptop, and what I saw on the screen changed everything. A few weeks after the baby shower, my son David called with news. "We've decided on a name," he said, his voice full of pride. "We're going to call her Luna." I paused, searching for the right words. "That's a pretty name, dear." I took a breath and made a gentle suggestion, a last attempt to weave our family into this new life. "What about for a middle name? Maybe Rose, after my mother." From the background, I heard his wife, Emily, let out a sharp, brittle laugh. "Oh, Carol, please, we're not using some dusty old-fashioned name. We want something modern and fresh, something without any baggage." Baggage. That's what she called our family history. My mother, David's grandparents. We were all just heavy luggage she was refusing to carry into her new life. My son said nothing to defend us. He just echoed his wife. "Yeah, Mom, we want something new." They weren't just naming a child. They were creating a person with no past, no roots connecting her to me. The truth behind her hatred was worse than I ever imagined. The phone in my quiet living room started to feel like a decoration. My son, David, used to call me every Sunday morning. It was our time. We'd talk about his week, the garden, anything and everything. After the fight about the baby's name, the calls stopped. A week went by, then 2. When he finally did call, I could hear his wife, Emily, whispering in the background. The conversations were short and hollow. "Hey, Mom, just checking in," he'd say, his voice strained. "Everything okay?" Before I could tell him about my week, he'd rush to hang up. "Great. Well, we've got to run. Talk to you later." Each missed call was a brick being placed in the wall she was building between us. He never asked about my life anymore. He never told me about his. I was being carefully and methodically cut out, like a person from a photograph. I could feel him slipping away, and my heart ached with a loneliness so deep it stole my breath. I had to do something before I was completely erased. That's when I realized just how far she would go to destroy me. I needed to do something with my hands, something other than wringing them with worry. I went to the little craft store downtown and bought the softest, purest white yarn I could find. Back home in my favorite armchair, I began to knit. The rhythmic click of the needles was a comfort in my silent house. With every stitch, I poured in a hope. With every row, I whispered a prayer for the little grandchild I had never met. I pictured them wrapped in its warmth, feeling safe and loved. This blanket was an act of quiet defiance. My daughter-in-law, Emily, could reject my gifts and my history, and my son, David, could stand by and let her. But she couldn't stop me from loving. This blanket was my love made real. It was a promise to that baby that a grandmother's love was waiting for them, patient and unconditional, no matter what walls were built to keep it out. I finished the last stitch the week the baby was due, folded it carefully and tied it with a satin ribbon. I was ready to offer one last piece of my heart. I spent 2 days waiting by the phone, my stomach in knots. The baby blanket I'd knitted sat wrapped in tissue paper on the hall table, a silent testament to my hope. Every ring made my heart leap. I imagined my son David, his voice filled with the same joy I'd felt when he was born. I imagined hearing my grandchild's first cry over the phone. But the call never came. Instead, my phone buzzed with a text message. I fumbled for my reading glasses, my hands shaking. The message was from David. It read, "Luna Rose born this morning. 7 Natalabes 2s. Emily and baby are fine. We'll let you know when we are ready for visitors. That was it. No joy, no emotion. It was as cold and sterile as a business memo. My granddaughter had a name. She was a person in the world. And I learned about it in a text message, like a distant acquaintance. I was a grandmother, but the news of her arrival brought me no joy, only a profound and bottomless ache of being shut out. My own son didn't want to hear my voice. I couldn't just sit at home. I had to do something. With the soft, wrapped blanket on the passenger seat, I drove to the hospital. My heart hammered against my ribs as I walked through the sliding glass doors. I didn't go up to the maternity ward. I sat in the lobby and called my son David. "David, honey, I'm downstairs," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I won't be any trouble. I just want to drop this gift off for Luna." His voice was tense. "Mum, you can't be here. I told you we'd call when we were ready." I swallowed hard, fighting back tears. "Please, just for a second. I don't even need to see her." The line was silent for a moment before he delivered the blow. "No," he said, his voice flat and final. "Emily is exhausted, and we need time to bond alone as a family. You need to go home now." He hung up. As a family that no longer included me. I was barred from the hospital where my only grandchild lay, just one floor above me. For the next 2 days, I waited for the call telling me they were coming home. I baked a batch of David's favourite cookies and tidied my already spotless living room, clinging to the hope that once they were settled, things would change. On the 3rd day, my best friend Linda stopped by for tea. She saw the worry on my face. "You haven't heard from them yet?" she asked gently. I shook my head, my throat too tight to speak. Linda stirred her tea, looking out the window. "That's odd," she said, thinking out loud. "Because I saw David's car in their driveway when I went to the grocery store this morning. I even saw him carry the baby's car seat inside." The teacup rattled in my saucer. They were home. My son David and his wife Emily had brought my granddaughter home just a few miles down the road, and they hadn't told me. It wasn't an oversight. It was a secret they had intentionally kept from me. This was a deliberate act of cruelty, and I suddenly knew this was only the beginning. After another week of agonizing silence, my son David finally called. His voice was flat and distant. "You can come over this afternoon," he said, "but Emily is still very tired, so you can only stay for 20 minutes. The short, rationed time felt like a punishment, but I agreed immediately. I arrived at their house with a box of homemade cookies, my heart pounding with a mix of hope and dread. Their living room was tense and quiet. My daughter-in-law Emily sat in a chair, holding baby Luna tightly against her chest, as if shielding her from a threat. I wasn't allowed to get too close. "She's beautiful," I whispered, my voice thick with emotion. "May I please hold her for just a moment?" Emily shook her head, her eyes cold. "No, the doctor said she's too fragile. We have to limit her contact with people." The lie hung in the air between us. I wasn't people. I was her grandmother. I sat on their couch for my 20 minutes, a visitor under guard, my arms aching with emptiness. This wasn't about protecting a baby. This was about hurting me. The painful visits continued for weeks, each one a perfect copy of the last. 20 minutes on the clock. My son David standing silently by. His wife Emily holding Luna just out of my reach. My heart broke a little more each time I left their quiet house. I saw my granddaughter grow bigger through pictures they posted online, but I never felt the warmth of her body against mine. I never got to smell her sweet baby scent or kiss her soft cheek. The ache of it all became a constant weight in my chest. One afternoon, sitting in their living room, I decided I couldn't bear the polite cruelty any longer. I had to know. I looked at Emily, holding the beautiful child I was forbidden to love up close. I kept my voice soft, trying to keep it from cracking with sadness. "Emily," I began, my heart pleading for me. "I'm just aching to hold her. When do you think that might be okay?" The question, full of all my pain and longing, hung in the suffocating silence. David looked at the floor. Then Emily finally looked at me. The ticking of the clock on the mantel was the only sound in the room. My simple question seemed to echo in the stillness. My daughter-in-law, Emily, stopped rocking the baby. She turned her head slowly and pinned me with a gaze so cold it stole my breath. All the pretense of politeness was gone, replaced by a pure, undisguised hatred. My son, David, stood by the window like a statue, refusing to look at me, refusing to save me from what was coming. I watched Emily's lips part, and a terrible certainty washed over me. There was no anger in her voice. It was something far worse. It was calm. It was the quiet, confident voice of someone who held all the power and delighted in using it. She looked me directly in the eye, and with a chilling finality, she said the 6 words that shattered my world. "Over my dead body," she whispered. My heart stopped. It wasn't an excuse. It was a life sentence. The truth was finally out, and the reason for her cruelty was worse than anything I could have ever imagined. I don't remember driving home from their house. The next thing I knew, I was sitting in my own dark living room, the car keys still clutched in my hand. The 6 words my daughter-in-law Emily had said echoed in the silence. Over my dead body. Over and over, my mind replayed the scene. The chilling calm in her voice, the way she held baby Luna like a shield, the way my son David had stood by the window and said nothing, his silence a deafening roar of agreement. I searched my memory, desperate to find a reason for this hatred. Had I said something wrong at their wedding? Had I offended her years ago without realizing it? I went through every interaction, every phone call, every visit. All I could find were my own attempts to love her, to welcome her into our family. The cruelty had no reason, no logic. It was a fire burning without any fuel. As the moon rose outside my window, a terrifying thought began to form. Maybe the reason had nothing to do with me at all. Maybe it was a secret she brought with her. After a long, sleepless night, I knew I had to call my son David. A small, foolish part of my heart still hoped he would wake up, realize the horror of what had happened, and fix it. I dialed his number from my kitchen, my hand trembling. He answered, and his voice was cold and tired. "David," I said, my own voice barely a whisper. "We have to talk about what Emily said. I'm so hurt, I don't understand." He cut me off. "There's nothing to talk about, Mom." I pushed, my voice cracking with desperation. "She said she would rather die than let me hold my grandchild. How could you just stand there and let her say that?" His response was not one of comfort. It was a heavy sigh of annoyance. "You pushed her," he said, his voice sharp. "I told you she was stressed and you kept pushing. You just have to give her space now. Don't make things worse." And there it was. I was the problem. My broken heart was an inconvenience. My son had chosen a side, and it wasn't mine. Weeks went by in a haze of silent, lonely pain. One afternoon, my best friend Linda stopped by with groceries. Trying to be kind, she said, "I saw the most precious photo of Luna online today. Emily posted it. She has David's smile, you know." Linda had no idea her words felt like 1,000 tiny needles. I didn't even know Emily had a social media page. That night I sat down with my tablet and typed in her name. Her whole life was there, open for the world to see. And it was filled with pictures of my granddaughter. I saw Luna's first smile. I saw a video of her laughing as my son David tickled her feet. I saw her wrapped in blankets I hadn't knitted, sleeping in a nursery I wasn't allowed to enter. I was a ghost, watching the life of my own family through a cold glass screen. Each happy photo, each loving comment from a stranger, was a public declaration of my exile. This was a new, modern kind of cruelty. Then I saw the date on one of the posts and my blood ran cold. The silence from my son David and his wife Emily was a constant, heavy presence in my quiet house. After days of wrestling with my pride and my pain, I decided to try one last time to reach out. I wouldn't ask for anything. I would simply offer kindness. Sitting at my kitchen table, I typed a short message on my phone, reading it over and over to be sure there was no way it could be seen as demanding. It said, "Hi, Emily. I know you need your space, but I just wanted you to know I was thinking of you, David. And sweet little Luna." I hit send, my heart fluttering with a fragile, foolish hope. A few minutes later, the tiny word "read" appeared beneath my message. She had seen it. I waited, watching the phone as if it might magically ring. An hour passed, then the whole afternoon. No reply ever came. She had received my message of peace and had answered it with a wall of deliberate silence. Her message was clear as day. To her, I did not exist. I realized then I had to choose between fighting for my son and saving myself. I still had the soft white baby blanket I had knitted. It felt like the last piece of my love that I had to give. One evening after dusk, I drove to their house. I couldn't bear to see them, so I walked up the dark driveway and quietly placed the wrapped gift on their front porch. The tag read, "For Luna, with all my love, Grandma." Weeks went by. I received no call, no text, not even a simple thank you. I knew they had it, but they refused to even acknowledge it. Then, late one night, I found myself back on my daughter-in-law Emily's social media page. She had posted a new photo of their dog, asleep in the corner of their living room. My eyes zoomed in. The dog wasn't in its bed. It was curled up on a familiar soft white blanket. My blanket. The gift I had poured my heart and soul into, the blanket meant to keep my granddaughter warm, was being used as a bed for their pet. My love was literally something for the dogs. That's when I realized just how far she would go to destroy me. Seeing that picture broke something in me I thought was already shattered. The next morning, my best friend Linda found me sitting at my kitchen table, unable to stop the tears from falling. "Carol, for heaven's sake, what is it?" she asked, her voice full of alarm. And for the first time, the whole ugly story came pouring out of me. The cruel words from my daughter-in-law, Emily, the weak excuses from my son, David, the ignored messages, and finally, the desecrated blanket. When I was done, Linda was quiet for a long moment, her face grim. Then she looked at me, her eyes blazing with a righteous anger that warmed my soul. "That is not just mean, Carol," she said, her voice shaking with rage. "That is monstrous. What they are doing to you is a deliberate campaign of cruelty. You are not overreacting and you are not going crazy." Hearing her say it, feeling her fury on my behalf, made me feel solid for the first time in months. I wasn't alone. Then she said the 6 words I'll never forget. The holidays arrived, not with joy, but with a quiet, aching dread. Thanksgiving had always been my favourite. My house would be filled with the warm smell of roasting turkey and the sound of my son David's laughter. This year, the house was silent. My phone never rang with an invitation. I ate a small dinner alone at my kitchen table, the silence so loud it felt like it was screaming. A few days later, my daughter-in-law Emily posted the photos online. David carving the turkey, baby Luna in a tiny dress, a table surrounded by Emily's family. They were smiling, the perfect picture of happiness. Christmas was the same. I left a gift on their porch in the cold, and it was never acknowledged. On Christmas morning, I saw the pictures of Luna in her festive pajamas, surrounded by a mountain of presents. I had been completely erased. They weren't just living their lives without me. They were performing their happy life for the world to see, making sure everyone knew I was not a part of it. The private pain was now a public humiliation, and the worst was yet to come. In the grey quiet of January, I got a phone call from my cousin Susan, who lives 2 states away. After the usual pleasantries, her voice took on a strange, hesitant tone. "So, Carol," she started, "is everything all right with you and David? I heard you might be having a difficult time with the new baby." I was confused. "A difficult time? What do you mean, Susan?" She was vague. "Oh, you know, it's just a big adjustment for everyone. Sometimes it's hard for grandmothers to let go." Let go? The words didn't make any sense. I was being pushed away, not clinging on. I hung up the phone with a cold feeling spreading through my chest. The conversation felt like a test, like she was trying to confirm a story she had already been told. It was clear that my son David and his wife Emily weren't just ignoring me. They were talking about me. They were building a narrative brick by brick, and I was clearly the villain in their story. I just had no idea what crime I was being accused of. The strange phone call with my cousin left me deeply unsettled. The next day, I told my best friend Linda about it over coffee at my kitchen table. Linda's face grew serious and she put her mug down. "Carol, I need to tell you something," she said, her voice low. "I ran into Susan Miller from our old church group at the grocery store. She asked about you. It seems Emily has been talking." My heart sank. What is she saying?" Linda took a deep breath. "She's telling people that you are having trouble with boundaries, that you are toxic and refuse to respect their rules as parents." The word toxic felt like a slap. Emily was taking my love, my gifts, my desire to be a grandmother, and twisting it into something ugly and controlling. She wasn't just erasing me from their life. She was trying to erase my good name from the town where I had lived my entire life. My son David was letting it happen. She was painting a picture of me, and it was a masterpiece of lies. After weeks of hiding in my house, my best friend Linda convinced me I had to get out. I was doing my weekly shopping at the local grocery store when I turned into the cereal aisle and my heart stopped. There they were. My son David was pushing the cart, and his wife Emily was holding baby Luna. For one foolish second, a wave of hope washed over me. Maybe here, in the bright lights of a public place, things could be normal. I took a step forward, a joyful smile starting to form on my face. Emily looked up and saw me. Her friendly expression vanished, replaced by a mask of cold fury. She didn't say a word. She didn't even shake her head. She simply turned her back to me, took Luna from David's arms and pushed the stroller quickly toward the front of the store, leaving me standing there. A woman I knew from church was just a few feet away holding a carton of milk, and she saw the whole thing. The heat of pure shame crept up my neck. My private sorrow had just become a public spectacle. As my daughter-in-law Emily stormed away with the baby, I was left standing alone in the aisle with my son David. He lingered for a moment, frozen between us. This was it. This was his chance to be a son, to walk over to me, to say something kind, to fix the terrible, humiliating scene his wife had just caused. I looked at him, my eyes pleading for him to do something, anything. I willed him to remember the mother who had raised him, who had loved him his entire life. He met my gaze for a brief second. His face was a painful mix of guilt and fear. He was afraid of her. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. Instead, he just gave me a small, pathetic shrug of his shoulders, as if to say, "What can I do?" And then he turned and hurried after his wife, leaving me there in the wreckage. That helpless shrug was more painful than any insult. It was the gesture of a coward. It was the final, heartbreaking proof that I had lost my son completely. I abandoned my half-full cart and fled the grocery store, blinded by tears. As soon as I got home, I called my son David, my hands shaking with a fury I hadn't felt before. "How could you?" I cried into the phone. "How could you just leave me standing there like that after what she did?" I expected an apology, or at least an excuse. Instead, his voice was calm and distant, like a stranger's. "Mum, you're getting emotional," he said. "You have to understand that we need to protect our peace. When you approached us like that, you crossed a boundary." The word stunned me into silence. "A boundary?" "David, it was the cereal aisle. I'm your mother." "This is what I'm talking about," he replied, his voice still maddeningly level. "You're not respecting our choices. Emily felt threatened, and I have to support her. We're just doing what's healthy for our family." He was twisting reality, making me the villain for wanting to say hello. He was making me feel crazy. And that's when I realized the truth was worse than I ever imagined. My phone call with my son David after the grocery store incident left me feeling like I was losing my mind. A few days later, I tried one more time, appealing to the happy past we shared. "David, please," I pleaded softly. "We were always so close. What happened to us?" His answer was colder than ice. He reached back a decade and twisted a memory into a new and ugly shape. "Let's be honest, Mum," he said. "You've never respected my choices. Remember how you fought me on my college major? This isn't new behavior from you." I was speechless. He was talking about a single 20-minute discussion that had ended with me hugging him and telling him I'd be proud of him no matter what. Now my daughter-in-law, Emily, had taught him how to rewrite our history. That brief, normal disagreement was now his proof that I had always been a toxic, controlling presence in his life. He was dismantling our past to justify his cruelty in the present. If my own memories could be used as a weapon against me, then nothing was safe. The truth behind their plan was worse than I ever imagined. The first week of June always meant my old friend Margaret's annual summer barbecue. I'd been going for 30 years. But this year, as the date got closer, my mailbox remained empty. Finally, I couldn't stand it anymore and called her. Her voice was strained and full of guilt. "Oh, Carol, I'm so sorry," she stammered. It's complicated this year." I held my breath, knowing what was coming. "Please, Margaret," I whispered, "just tell me." She finally broke, her voice cracking. "It's David and Emily," she said. "She told me that if you were there, they wouldn't be able to come. She said they had to protect their family from your negativity." My daughter-in-law, Emily, had forced my oldest friend to choose, and she had chosen the young, new family. Emily's campaign was working perfectly. She wasn't just taking my son from me, she was taking my entire world. I was being quarantined, cut off from everyone who ever cared about me. That's when I realized just how far she would go to destroy me. After the call with Margaret, something inside me finally broke. I sat in my favorite armchair, the silence of my living room pressing in on me. The smear campaign led by my son, David, and his wife, Emily, had been a success. My friends were gone. My family was gone. I was an outcast in the only town I had ever called home. All the anger and confusion I'd been feeling drained away, leaving only a hollow, bottomless grief. I wasn't just mourning for my granddaughter, Luna, the child I was forbidden to know. I was mourning for my son. The kind, happy boy whose pictures filled my home was gone forever, replaced by this cold stranger who would rewrite our past and abandon his own mother. I felt invisible, unloved, and completely erased. Emily had won. She had taken everything from me. I closed my eyes, a quiet tear tracing a path down my cheek, and surrendered to the darkness. I truly believed my story was over, but I was wrong. The fight for my life was just beginning. After months of crushing silence and isolation, I had finally hit rock bottom. I had given up. Then, one Tuesday afternoon, the phone rang. The screen showed my son's name, and my heart nearly stopped. I answered with a shaky, quiet hello. It was David. His voice was stiff and uncomfortable, as if the words were being forced out of him. "Hi, Mum," he said. "So, Luna's first birthday is next Saturday. We're having a small party for her at the local park. We were wondering if you would like to come." The words were like the first rain after a long drought. An invitation. After everything, an invitation. 1,000 questions flooded my mind. Was this a peace offering? Had his wife, Emily, finally had a change of heart? Was my son finally standing up for me? A tiny, fragile bud of hope began to push its way through the hardened soil of my grief. "Yes," I whispered, my voice thick with unshed tears. "Oh, David, yes. I would love to." I went to bed that night with a genuine smile, believing this was the beginning of a new chapter. My hopeful feeling lasted for less than 24 hours. The next day, my phone buzzed with a long text message from my son, David. It had his wife, Emily's, cold, controlling voice all over it. The text started with the time and location for the party, but then it continued. "Mum, just a few ground rules to make sure the day is calm and happy for Luna," it read. "First, please only stay for 1 hour from 2 to 3 p.m. Second, we ask that you don't offer any parenting advice to us or our friends. Third, and this is the most important one, you are not to ask to hold the baby." Each rule was a carefully aimed dart, piercing the fragile hope I'd felt. This wasn't a peace offering, it was a list of terms for my surrender. I was being invited not as a loving grandmother, but as a dangerous outsider who needed to be managed and controlled. My best friend Linda was fit to be tied. "Don't you dare go, Carol," she insisted. "This is a trap." But she didn't understand. This was my only chance to see my granddaughter. I had to go. I arrived at the local park at 2 o'clock sharp, carrying a small, perfectly wrapped gift. I saw them at a picnic table under a big oak tree. Balloons fluttered in the breeze. My son, David, held Luna on his hip. My daughter-in-law, Emily, watched me approach, her eyes as sharp and cold as a hawk's. I took a deep breath and remembered the rules. My heart ached to rush over and hug my granddaughter, but I kept my distance. "Hello, everyone," I said with a polite, calm smile. I was the perfect guest. I spoke only when spoken to. I didn't mention the past. I didn't offer a single piece of advice. When Luna started crying, I physically stopped myself from reaching for her. I watched another woman, Emily's mother, scoop her up and comfort her. I was a stranger at my own granddaughter's first birthday party, a ghost in the corner of a happy family picture. For 55 agonizing minutes I followed every rule. I was determined not to give them any reason to punish me further. I was checking my watch, ready to make my quiet exit as my hour at the party was almost up. My granddaughter Luna was on a blanket on the grass, playing with a soft block. Suddenly she looked up, and her eyes met mine across the lawn. A slow, gummy smile spread across her face. Then, to my astonishment, she started to crawl, not towards her mother, Emily, or her father, David, but directly towards me. She was a woman on a mission, her little hands and knees pumping. She crawled right up to my feet and pulled herself up on my leg, looking up at me with pure, innocent trust. For a moment, the world stopped. The rules, the hate, the pain. It all vanished. I looked at Emily, who was frozen in shock. Without waiting for permission I might never get, I leaned down and scooped my granddaughter into my arms. For the first time, I held her. She fit perfectly against my chest, her little head smelling of sunshine and baby soap. It was the single most joyful moment of my entire year. I had finally held my grandchild, and nothing could take that away from me. The beautiful feeling of holding Luna in my arms carried me through the rest of the day. I went home from the park floating on a cloud of pure love, believing that magical moment had changed everything. I was wrong. The next morning, my son, David, called. The warmth and hope in my heart turned to ice the moment I heard his voice. It was cold, flat, and full of a familiar, chilling disappointment. "Mum," he said with no greeting, "we need to talk about the party yesterday." My stomach dropped. "What about it?" I asked, my voice small. "It was a disaster," he said, the accusation clear. "You holding Luna completely ruined her entire routine. She was fussy all night and refused to sleep in her own crib. It was a terrible night for us, all because her schedule was disrupted." I was speechless. He was blaming me for a baby crawling to her own grandmother. The one perfect moment of my year was being twisted into a crime. The beautiful memory was now a weapon, and the trap my daughter-in-law Emily had set was springing shut. I tried to reason with him, my mind reeling from the accusation. "David, she crawled to me," I said, my voice pleading. "It was a beautiful moment. How could that have caused any harm?" His response showed just how completely his wife Emily controlled his mind. "You don't understand the damage you've done," he said, his voice sounding like he was reading from a script. Your decision to pick her up was incredibly selfish. You completely ignored our boundaries and the structure we've been working so hard to build for her." He took a breath and delivered the final devastating blow. "Emily feels like this has set us back months in our healing process." Healing? What were they healing from? From my love? From a grandmother's touch? That's when I finally understood. The party wasn't a peace offering. It was a test. A test I was designed to fail. My one moment of grace, of pure joy, was the very thing they used to justify shutting me out for good. The truth behind her hatred was worse than I ever imagined. My son David's voice on the phone was devoid of all emotion as he finished his speech. "Because of what happened," he said, "Emily and I feel we need to take an even bigger step back now, for Luna's sake." I was silent, unable to form a response. The cruelty was so deep, so twisted, I couldn't even breathe. He wasn't finished. "This is too much for us to handle right now," he continued. "We think it's best if we just don't have any contact for a while. Maybe we can try again in another year or so." Another year. A whole year of my granddaughter's life that I would miss. It wasn't a suggestion. It was a prison sentence. And in that moment, I finally saw the truth with perfect, heartbreaking clarity. It didn't matter what I did. If I stayed away, I was neglectful. If I came closer, I was toxic. If I followed the rules would change. The game was rigged. I would always be the villain in the story my daughter-in-law Emily was writing, and my own son was the one holding the pen. After the final phone call with my son David, the fight finally left me. It drained out of me like sand from a broken hourglass, leaving behind a hollow emptiness. The hope I had foolishly allowed to grow was now a dead and withered thing. For days I just sat in my quiet living room, the silence a heavy blanket. The war was over. My daughter-in-law Emily had won. She had successfully erased me, not just from their lives but from my son's heart. He was gone. The boy I had raised was a ghost, replaced by her puppet. I looked at the photos on my mantel. David on his first bicycle. David at his high school graduation. It was like looking at pictures of a stranger I had known a long time ago. The grief was a physical weight, pressing down on my chest, making it hard to breathe. The pain was no longer sharp and surprising. It was a dull, constant ache. It was the ache of a final goodbye. I had lost everything. And I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that I was completely and utterly alone. One grey Saturday morning, I knew what I had to do. I couldn't live surrounded by ghosts and broken dreams anymore. I went into the spare bedroom, the little room I had secretly hoped would be a nursery one day. One by one, I gathered every baby item I had collected. The beautiful book of bedtime stories. The little yellow duck I'd bought for her first bath. The tiny soft socks I couldn't resist at the pharmacy. And last, I took out the soft white blanket, the one I had poured all my love into, the one that had been used as a dog bed. I folded each item carefully, my tears falling silently onto the soft fabric. This was a funeral. It was the burial of a dream, the letting go of a future that would never be. I placed everything into a sturdy cardboard box, taped it shut, and wrote one word on the side. Luna. With all the strength I had left, I carried that heavy box up the rickety attic stairs and pushed it into a dark corner. I was saying goodbye. I was choosing to survive. I thought I would just sit in my quiet house and fade away, but my best friend Linda wouldn't let me. 2 days after I put that box in the attic, she was at my front door, her face set with determination. "Get your walking shoes on, Carol," she said, not asking but telling. "You're coming with me." I tried to refuse. "I'm too tired, Linda. I just can't." She just shook her head, her expression softening. "I'm not leaving without you," she said gently. "Even if we only go to the end of the street, you are not disappearing. I won't allow it." She was a lifeline, pulling me from the deep, dark water of my grief. We walked through the local park, the same park where my granddaughter's birthday party had been. The pain was still there, a sharp stone in my shoe, but Linda's steady presence beside me made it bearable. She didn't let me talk about my son, David, or his wife, Emily. She just talked about her garden and the weather. For 1 hour, she forced me back into the world of the living. A week later, my best friend, Linda, showed up at my house again, this time waving a piece of paper. "I have a surprise for you," she announced. "I signed us up for a pottery class at the community studio. It's every Wednesday night." My heart sank. The thought of being in a room full of strangers, trying to learn something new, felt impossible. "Oh, Linda, I can't," I said, shaking my head. "I'm not in the mood for that." She was relentless. "It's not about your mood," she said firmly. "It's about using your hands. It's about getting out of this house." I was too tired to argue with her, so the next Wednesday I found myself in the bright, dusty community pottery studio. The room was filled with the earthy smell of wet clay and the quiet hum of spinning wheels. I felt numb and completely out of place as the teacher showed us how to center a lump of clay. My hands felt clumsy and useless. I couldn't imagine creating anything but a lopsided, broken mess. It felt like a perfect reflection of my life. My first few weeks at the pottery studio were a disaster. My pots were wobbly, my bowls collapsed, and my hands were always covered in a frustrating grey sludge. But my friend Linda made me keep going back. Every Wednesday night, I would sit at the wheel, and for 2 hours, my world would shrink to the lump of spinning clay in front of me. I had to focus. I had to concentrate on the pressure of my fingers, the speed of the wheel, the feel of the clay taking a new shape. Slowly, without me even realizing it, something began to shift. The simple physical act of creating something with my hands was a quiet comfort. It didn't fix the gaping hole in my heart left by my son David and his wife Emily. But it was a distraction. It was a small island of peace in an ocean of pain. One evening I managed to create a small, simple bowl that wasn't lopsided. It was the first whole thing I had made in a very long time. It was a start. The people in my Wednesday pottery class were a comfort. They were a mix of ages, a young teacher, a retired man who loved making funny-looking mugs, and a few women my age. They were kind and friendly, but in a quiet, respectful way. No one asked about my family or my past. In that bright, dusty room at the community studio, I wasn't a rejected grandmother or a grieving mother. I was just Carol, the woman who was finally learning how to make a bowl that didn't wobble. My best friend Linda was still my rock, but this new community was different. It was a place where I could build a new piece of myself. "That's a lovely glaze you chose, Carol," the teacher might say. Or, "How did you get the handle so smooth?" Simple, gentle conversations about clay and colour. I was slowly starting to feel like a person again, separate from the terrible story that had been written for me by my son, David, and his wife, Emily. I was building something new from the wreckage, but I was about to discover if it was strong enough to stand. One evening, as I was leaving the community pottery studio, I saw a flyer tacked to the bulletin board. It was for the local library. They were looking for volunteers for their children's story hour. "Share the magic of reading," the colourful poster said. My heart gave a painful twist. All I could think about was the beautiful storybook I had bought for my granddaughter Luna, the one that was now packed away in a box in my attic. The dream of reading to my own grandchild was a wound that was still raw and deep. I stood there for a long time, just looking at the flyer. My first instinct was to walk away, to protect myself from the pain. But then another thought came. Maybe this was a way to heal that exact wound. Maybe I could take all the love I had stored up for Luna and give it to other children. The idea was terrifying, but for the first time in a very long time, it also felt like hope. I took a deep breath, pulled a little tab with the phone number off the bottom of the flyer and put it in my purse. A few weeks later, I was sitting in a tiny chair in the sunny children's section of our town library. A circle of wide-eyed little ones sat on the colourful rug in front of me. My hands were a little shaky as I opened the first picture book, but my voice was calm and steady. For 1 hour every Tuesday morning, I became Miss Carroll, the story lady. The children didn't care that my heart was broken or that I was the toxic grandmother in a story someone else was telling. They just loved the silly voices I made for the bears and the gentle way I showed them the pictures. I was being a grandmother. I was rocking babies on my lap, wiping a sticky hand and sharing the magic of stories. All the love that my son David and his wife Emily had rejected now had a place to go. It filled a deep, hollow space inside me. It wasn't the life I had dreamed of, but it was a good life. One morning, as I finished a story, I looked up at the parents standing nearby, and my heart stopped. She was standing there, watching me. My heart leaped into my throat. The woman standing at the back of the library, watching my story time, looked so much like Emily's sister. For a second, I was terrified the war had followed me here. But then she smiled and led a small child away, and I realized she was just a stranger. The moment passed, but it was a reminder that my newfound peace was fragile. A week later, that peace was put to the test. I was leaving the pharmacy on Main Street when I saw them across the street. My son David, his wife Emily, and my granddaughter Luna, who was now walking, holding her father's hand. A year ago, I would have run across the street, desperate for a crumb of attention, willing to endure any humiliation. But as I stood there, a different feeling washed over me. It was a calm strength. I had a life now. A good life. I deserved to protect it. So instead of crossing the street toward them, I quietly turned and walked in the opposite direction, my head held high. I was choosing my own peace over their chaos. The women from my pottery class had become my friends. Not just Wednesday night friends, but real, true friends. One afternoon, 4 of us went for coffee at a little cafe downtown. My best friend Linda was there too. We were talking about a disastrous pot that had exploded in the kiln, and one of the women, Margaret, told a story so funny that I threw my head back and laughed. It wasn't a small, polite chuckle. It was a deep, genuine belly laugh that came from a place I thought was gone forever. The sound of it surprised me so much that I stopped mid-laugh. Everyone looked at me, smiling. "It's good to hear you laugh like that, Carol," Margaret said kindly. I realized it was the first time I had truly laughed in years. It was the sound of healing. It was the sound of a life that was mine again, a life not defined by the cruelty of my son David and his wife Emily. The joy was real. It was mine. And for the first time, I believed that maybe, just maybe, it was here to stay. I woke up one Tuesday morning and the sun was shining. I spent the morning weeding my garden. In the afternoon, I went to the library for my story hour, where a little boy gave me a colourful picture he had drawn for me. That evening, I sat at my own little pottery wheel, which Linda had helped me set up in my spare room, and worked on a set of new bowls. As I washed the clay from my hands at the kitchen sink, watching the sunset paint the sky pink and orange, a strange and wonderful thought occurred to me. I hadn't thought about my son, David, or his wife Emily all day. Not once. The constant, heavy ache in my chest, the one that had been my companion for so long, was gone. I felt light. I felt free. The shadows that had followed me for years had finally receded, chased away by the gentle sun of my new life. The war was over, and I had survived. I went to check the mail, feeling a sense of quiet triumph. And then I saw the envelope, and my blood ran cold. My hands trembled as I picked up the strange envelope from my mailbox. It had no return address. I tore it open, my heart pounding, only to find a generic flyer for a local politician. I let out a shaky laugh. After everything, I was still expecting the next blow to fall. The real test came a week later. It was my birthday. An unknown number buzzed on my phone with a text message. My heart gave a familiar, painful lurch. It read, "Happy birthday, Mum. Hope you're okay." It was from my son, David. A year ago, those words would have been a lifeline. I would have wept with relief and called him immediately, desperate for any crumb of connection. But I was a different woman now. I looked at the message on the screen, a ghost from a life I no longer lived. I felt a brief, sharp pang of sadness, not for myself, but for the son I had lost. For the man who was too weak to write more, too weak to call. Then, with a steady hand, I deleted the message and put my phone away. Months passed in quiet, happy peace. My life was full with pottery, the library, and my wonderful friends. I truly believed the story was over. Then, one afternoon, a large, heavy box was delivered to my front porch. There was no note, but I knew who it was from. My hands were steady as I cut the tape. Inside, nestled in tissue paper, was every gift I had ever given them. The beautiful book of bedtime stories. My son David's polished silver baby rattle. And on the very top, the soft white hand-knitted blanket. It was my daughter-in-law Emily's final petty act of cruelty. A carefully curated box of returned love, designed to wound me one last time, to remind me of everything I had lost. She wanted to prove she had erased every last trace of me. The old Carol would have collapsed in a heap of tears, shattered by the gesture. But as I stood in my living room looking down at the box, I felt nothing but a distant, quiet pity for a woman with so much poison in her heart. She hadn't won. She had lost. I looked at the returned treasures in the box, symbols of a love that was rejected and a dream that had died. But they were just things now. Their power to hurt me was gone. I picked up the box, carried it through my house, and walked out the back door to the garbage bins. I didn't hesitate. I simply lifted the heavy box and dropped it inside with a dull final thud. I closed the lid, and with it, the final chapter of that sad story. I turned and walked back toward my home. Through the kitchen window I could see my best friend Linda and my new friends from the pottery studio setting out cups for tea, their faces bright with laughter. My house wasn't a sad, lonely place anymore. It was a warm, welcoming home, filled not with the ghosts of what I had lost, but with the vibrant, loving life I had built from the ashes. I opened the door and stepped inside, a feeling of pure, unshakable peace settling over me. I was finally free.